Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Lamia and I make videos under the themes of education, global citizenship and sustainable development. And if you rock with any of those, or if you rock with one of my videos, you should really subscribe, because apparently, according to my YouTube studio, 88.6% of people who watch my videos have not yet subscribed. That's a crazy statistic. So in this episode of my interning at the UN series, I will be reviewing my UN internship. I'm so excited because I've honestly been building up to this episode. So I'll be reviewing my UN internship, the good, the double-edged swords, and the respectfully no. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. So I believe in starting off on a good note. So we're going to start with the good. I debated putting this into a separate video because there's just so many good things I have to say about my internship, but for the sake of brevity and not making this video too long, I've just listed some of my favorite things about this internship. Getting to work with brilliant people. So as you can imagine, I got to work with really intelligent people who, on top of that, were just very down to earth. I especially thrive in environments where I have a lot to learn from everyone. So this was just me in my element. Every single day, I kid you not, I felt like I was like Charlie in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. I just was constantly in awe. I had something to learn about, obviously the work at hand, but I also had, stuff to, when you work in such a cosmopolitan team, everybody can teach you something about their country and their culture, and it was just really interesting and exciting for me. Just a great environment to be in, getting to work with people from a variety of academic backgrounds. So as I explained in a previous video in this series, I was interning specifically for an initiative called Heya, which basically aims to connect every school in the world to the internet and every young person to information, opportunity and choice. And of course, the connectivity aspect of that meant that I was working with a lot of data scientists and people in STEM. That was just so exciting for me because I dropped all STEM subjects at the earliest opportunity. One of my favorite things in the world is to do what I call social observations, which it does what it says on the tin. I think at this point I'm ready to write my first fiction book because I've collected enough data on just human nature. One of my social observations was realizing how very differently STEM-oriented people communicate. So for example, I remember the one time I had to actually clarify something with one of the scientists in the team. My email went unanswered, and then I quickly realized that if I had to use something more speedy like WhatsApp, I would get a response, and that's actually what ended up happening. It was just really, really fascinating to me, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get the opportunity to work with engineers again. Like I said, it was just mind-blowing. The focus on quality education. Heya, their main targeted SDG, if you will, was SDG number 4, quality education, which is also the SDG that I am most passionate about, hence this channel, guys. In retrospect, it's mind-blowing to me that I just genuinely really lucked out in that, because I feel like when you're in your early career, these are just my opinions, I feel like if you are in this international development space, you can be developing what you are, most passionate about, but I think for the most part at this stage, you just have to be flat out interested and passionate about international development, because at least for me personally, I don't think I'm in a space where I can be declining any offers, even if they're in something quite far away from education. So I constantly have to remind myself that that was just really lucky. So, just every day getting to work on something that I, as an individual, am so passionate about. Crazy. Lots of room for growth. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, Heya is pretty much a startup within the UN system. In that regard, there was lots of wiggle room, for lack of a better expression, meaning that I had the freedom to assist with other departments outside of communications. I've mentioned I also assisted with the country engagement team, and I feel like had I not been in a startup environment, jumping departments would not have been that feasible. On the whole, I was really, really happy that I was working in such a flexible team. Of course, it goes without saying, but the diversity. I know I sound like a stuck record going on and on about the diversity of this team. At the time when I was interning, there were about 30 staff members or under, and so many nationalities were represented within those 30 staff members. It was just the coolest thing to me. Like I said, I particularly thrive in international environments, and it really makes me happy when it's not just a theoretical, we value diversity and inclusion, but you can actually see it in the team. The double-edged swords, affiliation to the organization. Let me explain. Please let me explain. Obviously, I'm in my early career. My CV could use as much clout as it can get. And for the most part, it is such an honor to have the UN's brand on my CV. This is not something I take lightly. I mean, in the words of Taylor Swift, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this. But on the other hand, when you are this young, for context, I'm in my early 20s. Yeah, like when you're this young and you have an affiliation to this world-renowned organization, I feel like it can be a lot of pressure. So let me tell you a story that encapsulates this feeling very well. So in December of 2021, my sister and I were in a coastal town in Thailand, and we were walking along the beach. I kid you not, we're literally having a conversation about roti, which is like a Thai style crepe. And literally we're having this very important high level conversation about roti, and we're walking towards like a roti van. And I'm still relatively new to Thailand, so my sister's trying to explain what kind of roti I can get. And she's like, you can get one with chocolate. And I was like, no, I need one with Nutella. And she's like, yeah, there are some with chocolate. And I'm like, it needs to be Nutella. Anyway, out of the blue, this man all of a sudden says, I had a feeling you'd be English speakers. Anyway, we pick up from his accent that he is American. He goes on in this conversation, and he then reveals to us that he's actually an English teacher at a Catholic school in this coastal town. It quickly becomes clear to us that he is actually, hoping to kind of informally like recruit us, or just to kind of make us aware that should we want to be English teachers in this coastal town, he's happy to, introduce us to his school because he's hoping to retire, if I remember the conversation correctly. And so you get the gist. It kind of got to a situation where we would have to kind of disclose that, we weren't really seeking to be English teachers. So my sister obviously went ahead and mentioned that, she was employed. And so he then, gestures to me. He's like, are you interested in an English job? What are you doing? And so that's when I mentioned, oh, I'm actually interning. He, then gestured to me to elaborate on that. And so of course I told him I'm interning at the UN. So here's where I give you guys a little backstory. I know yes from no. On a good day, I even know right from wrong. But let me tell you something that will forever confuse me. East from west. And to my defense, there's a really good reason as to why this is the case. So when I was in grade 4, we used to have those joint desks. I hope you know the ones that I'm talking about. We used to have those joint desks. If I can find a picture on the World Wide Web, I'll insert it. And we had this boy come to our school for literally a term or 2 terms. And he was from Scotland. And like I've been mentioning in this video, before I even left Zimbabwe, I think I've always been internationally inclined. So I was really happy that I was actually paired to sit next to him, because I was fascinated. I wanted to know everything about Scotland. And of course, at the time, I didn't understand why he came to Zimbabwe and literally left after like 2 terms. But now that I've lived in the United Kingdom, I think, having a break and running away to the African sun for 2 terms makes absolute sense to me. I'd do the same. So the one day we were learning about, the compass. Of course, we're just learning the cardinal points. And Cornelius was actually left-handed. So this is where I'm going to cut him some slack. I think this is why he did this. And he basically came up with like a mnemonic for us to remember the cardinal points. So of course, he lets me know that he's just come up with an Einstein brilliant idea, and he's like, I've just thought of an amazing mnemonic. His mnemonic to remember the cardinal points was, now we shall eat. Except it was anti-clocks. It was very much anti-clockwise. And this happened, so I was grade 4, so I was about 9 years old. But the problem with me is I have the memory of an elephant. I don't forget anything, which is all well and good. It's great to have a good memory, except when you've been taught something incorrect, that kind of stays in there too. So I will always confuse east for west and vice versa, even when I'm speaking to a stranger in a coastal town in Thailand who now has high expectations of me because of my affiliation to the world's largest international organization. So he then mentions that he is from Seattle. I've never been to the United States of America, but as Trevor Noah has profoundly put it, The rest of the world has to know about the States. People from America don't really have to know about the rest of the world. Do I not go and say, Seattle, that's on the East Coast? He was so disappointed, you guys. To which he responded, it's on the West Coast. You work for the UN. Aren't you guys supposed to know like geography? If ever there was a time where I wanted the earth to swallow me whole, it would have been then. Like, it actually would have been then. Shout out to my sister Ayan for carrying the rest of the conversation as I drifted off into my thoughts, thinking about how I could redeem the organization from this embarrassment, because I knew as an individual I'd never see this man again in my life, but for as long as he lives, he'll always be aware of the United Nations. Yikes. So for the rest of the conversation, I had to become the person that I'm most easily annoyed by, and that is a person who constantly throws in bits of trivia and information that are totally unnecessary and serve only for a person to prove how much knowledge they have. So I remember a few moments later, something came up. I was like, Seattle's on the border with British Columbia, right? And he was like, yeah, you see, you do know. And in that moment, honestly, the weight of the world was lifted off of my shoulders and I was really happy, but it still wasn't satisfactory enough for me. So as the conversation progressed, again, shout out to my sister for carrying that conversation. He had mentioned his surname to us. It turns out that his surname is also the name of a really prestigious Canadian university. In a normal conversation, I would not see the need to mention something like that, but let me remind you of the stakes in this conversation. So of course I was like, like the Canadian university. And then he was like, yeah, actually. And it was just very satisfactory to see redemption being done slowly but surely in the form of know-it-all interjections into a conversation. And he then was like, yeah, actually, somebody had bought me a cap from that university, from their like souvenir shop, just because of, it's also my surname. I was like, that's lovely. Again, I don't want this to be confused for me being ungrateful for something that is really an honor, but I just wanted to portray that an affiliation to the organization when you're really young can also feel like a lot of pressure. I soon realized afterwards that it probably would have been a good idea for me to take my mandatory courses at the beginning of my internship as opposed to in the middle, because in the mandatory courses that you have to take when you become, at least, I don't know how it is for any other UN agency, but for UNICEF you have to take courses in there's one called Be Safe, which is about security in general. There's one about cyber security. There's one about ethics and integrity, which I feel is the main one. And in these courses they lay down the rules of how you are expected to behave as a staff member, and those courses were really helpful to me. I finally got clarity on what is permissible for me to share and what is, considered private information. Should you get a UN internship, highly recommend doing those courses as soon as you start, because they are really so helpful and they provide really great guidance. It was remote. So I remember a few weeks into my internship, my gran said to me, so had it not been for the pandemic, would you have been in New York? And I was like, yeah, I would have been in the Big Apple. But honestly, after some thought, literally in the same breath, I was like, hold on, no. Actually, no, I wouldn't have been, because had it not been remote, Giga as a whole, but also the pandemic was largely responsible for why it was remote, I probably would not have applied for the internship, because even though it was a paid internship, realistically speaking, my stipend would not have scratched the surface in a city as expensive as New York. So yes, I was, in that sense, really, really grateful because, I got to do the internship. But on the other hand, I think you guys would know from, doing online school and online working, the vibe isn't quite the same as actually being in person. So my fellow intern, even though the internship was remote, she had actually chosen to move to New York. There was a day where there was an event happening at headquarters and she went, rightfully so, and she actually got a selfie with the executive director, and I just thought that was so cool. And yeah, it kind of made me realize that even though I was really grateful that my internship was remote, it wasn't quite the same. The respectfully no, the duration of the internship. So as I mentioned in a previous video, I felt like 4 months was just kind of like in no man's land. It wasn't 3 months long and it wasn't 6 months long. It was just kind of like in between. I really don't know the reason as to why it was 4 months long. Of course, like anybody in their right mind, I would have preferred for it to be 6 months long, just because who doesn't want, more experience? The end of my internship. So as someone who is constantly moving to different countries, you would think that I have, a handle on farewells by now, but actually quite the contrary. I'm still really bad at goodbyes. I still get very emotional when I have to leave people and places, and my internship was no different. I woke up every day for 4 months straight, with this task, with this mission, and I was working with people who were equally as passionate as me. It was also the first time where I was surrounded with people who were, for lack of a better word, as idealistic as me. For the longest time, I have not been around people who have, similar aspirations and goals as me. So for the first time ever, I felt like I didn't feel like an anomaly. I actually felt this is going to sound so cliche, but it's true. I just felt like I was home, like I was with people who were just as stoked about the goal and the mission as I was. When that is your reality for 4 months and then you can, kind of see the end in sight, it was definitely hard, I'm not gonna lie. Although I do need to mention, surprisingly, my penultimate week of my internship was a lot more difficult than my final week. I think in my penultimate week, it kind of hit me. My final week was more, filled with like logistics and logistically signing off. But of course, all good things do infamously come to an end. And my mom reminded me that really I had to be proud of everything I accomplished. Very much that cliche saying of don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. There's truth in that. And that brings me to the end of this video. I really hope you guys have enjoyed my review of my internship. I also want to say thank you so much to everyone who is new here. I'm so happy that this community is growing. It's just so cool to me that, something that I had envisioned is slowly but surely coming into fruition. And I'm so glad that you're here. And I really hope that this video was helpful. And I'll see you in my next one.